Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and here we have the Ninjago Crystalized Summer Wave of sets. For the most part, there's one more that I will be showing off later in the video that I wasn't able to pick up in this haul, but this is basically almost all the sets except the smallest one. Now, I am really excited because this has been one of the most anticipated waves of Ninjago yet. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on here, and I'm here to show it to all of you. Alright, so before we get started here, do note that I actually put out part 1 of this review, which was looking at the individual minifigures. You can find that video linked in the description below. Now, I will be mentioning what figures come with what sets and talking a little bit about the figure distribution at the end of the video, but for the most part, this is focused mostly on the actual builds and not the individual figures. So if you want to see an in-depth look at the actual LEGO crystallized minifigures, go down to the link in the description below. With that, let's now take a look at the sets. Alright, so here are all 8 Ninjago Crystalized sets fully built with all of the minifigures as well for us to take a look at. For the purposes of this review, I'll be starting from the smallest, working my way all the way up to the top, and while I talk about each of these sets, I'll kind of try to focus on a few key points. Playability and value are the 2 big things I want to touch on here, as well as just giving my general thoughts on each set. I will try to keep the thoughts on each individual set fairly quick so we can give a full summary at the end. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. Alright, so starting off here, we have the first set. This is the $20 or €20 price point Jay's Golden Dragon motorcycle. It is pretty much your standard Ninjago oversized $20 bike set. However, this does actually have a few nice and useful things that are actually very special to the set in particular. So first of all, the Minifig Selection I will go over very quickly because again, I already did the minifigure review. We have the Golden Dragon version of Jay, who is exclusive to the set, featuring some excellent transparent yellow legs and arms. Really great to get that. We also have one of the Vengestone Warriors here, specifically the one with the one transparent arm configuration. It has a side build for the Vengestone Spider, which is pretty interesting how prominent this has been in the TV show so far. Usually it's pretty hit or miss whether or not these side builds actually make it into the show, but now, after seeing the first 12 episodes, I only wish that this build was included in more sets because there's actually an army of these in the TV show and you only get one of them by getting all the sets because it only comes in this one set. Still, this is a great representation of how it looks on screen, and it's nice to get this, which is pretty much kind of a throwaway side build, but it's actually very prominent in the story, which is why it is actually very important. Now, the bike itself is a standard large-scale bike. You actually have a kickstand here in the form of just the standard flag here, which can be pulled up. It rolls very nicely, especially because they used the Spike Prime wheel. This is one of the best wheels that LEGO has come up with in recent history. The tire is molded onto the wheel itself, and it's a very, very momentum-sustaining wheel. As you can see, you can just spin it, and it will roll right up. It's just really fun to roll. And of course, on the back, they're just using the Season 11 Secrets of the Forbidden Spinjitzu wheel cover here, which works out perfectly fine on the main tire, which spins just like so. And that's really all there is to it. Now this has an interesting function as well, because as you can see here, they are reusing the dual molded transparent yellow and gold headpiece from some of the Dragon sets for the core wave, except they're using it as the front of the bike. Of course, the theming of this wave is Dragon theme for the Ninja, but this one goes above and beyond because not only does it actually incorporate the Dragon head into the build, which actually looks really good, it does look like the front of a motorcycle, but they actually have made it such that it works as an actual Dragon head itself. Not sure if this will even actually be incorporated in the show whatsoever, but as you can see here, you can actually open and close the jaw. This is an advertised feature for the set, and they even include the bottom jaw, or the suggestion of a bottom jaw with this piece right here, to really make you be able to chomp and even roar like it shows on the back of the box art. This set is pretty minimal on stickers, just having the 3 stickers here, which do add to the look, but definitely were not necessary. And if you want to see what Jay looks like on top of the bike, you can really just take him right there, stand them up like so, kind of splay the wings backwards a little bit just so they don't fall over, and there you go. There he is on his bike. Of course, the wings are very oversized, but you can very much see that this definitely works well as a dragon-like form with the front dragon head and the very large back wings. But honestly, that's pretty much all there is to say about the set in particular. This is the only set that did not include the standard golden ninja outfit for the actual vehicle, instead opting to include the exclusive dragon element. So if you do want to display all the vehicles together, thankfully, they included the extra golden J figure in the Samurai X Mech set, which makes sense because it is a Nia set, so you could easily just put him on the bike should you wish. At $20, this is pretty much the perfect large-scale Ninjago bike. Nothing super revolutionary, but it's just a very very wholesome build, and I don't really have anything bad to say about it. With that, let's now move on to the next set. Next up, we have the $30 Zanes Dragon Jet here. This comes with 3 minifigures. The golden ninja suit version of Zayn, you have King Vangelis, aka the Skull Sorcerer, and then you have the dragon version of Cole. So this minifigure selection is really great because it absolutely makes sense that the antagonist is flying because of the jet, as well as Cole himself being in the dragon form. Zayn is the only one without wings because of course he does have the jet, so it really does make sense to include these particular figures in the set itself. In terms of pairing up Cole with the Skull Sorcerer, I think that also makes total sense because they are direct rivals from Season 13, so I really do appreciate the special thought that went into actually picking the minifig selection for this one in particular. Cole, as we saw, we got a closer look at him for the minifigure video, but he has these excellent transparent orange detailing. Definitely not one of my favorite dragon forms because I do feel that the transparent orange blends a little bit too much into the gold, doesn't really give a full distinction with the color scheme, but it is nice to get, and Cole having orange featured prominently on his color scheme is always a bonus. The Skull Sorcerer himself definitely could have been improved as well. I really do wish that LEGO took the opportunity to actually improve the mask. That being said, I completely understand why they didn't because it would have required, if not a new mold, at least new technology to print on it, which definitely was probably not the best use of budget for this particular wave. Zayn is another great figure with the gold and the exposed reactor there in the metal blue and silver on the torso. I just really like the way the golden suits look. Placing the weaponless version of Zayn into the cockpit here, let's take a look at the actual set itself. So moving these aside, this does feel very reminiscent of some of the many Ninjago Jets we've gotten over the past. It really reminds me of Jay's Stormfighter, specifically the 2012 version, which was a smaller set at $20, but definitely did feel that it had this very similar shaping, and surprisingly a very similar action feature as well. The way the function works is that you specifically just take the jet and you push inwards and the blades will splay out. So this is kind of like a hover mode or an attack mode, I guess. It's a cool function. It's very smooth to move it back and forth. Honestly, the way they actually have it set up kind of reminds me of some of the vintage classic space stuff, like the Monorail Station for the Futuron monorail had a very similar function specifically to transform the base. They're just using these standard LEGO turntable pieces. Very, very simple in the way it works, but very satisfying to play with. Unfortunately, that also means that it's a little bit wobbly. As you can see that in its standard configuration, it kind of does wobble back and forth just like that. It's very easy to get it in a strange angle there. But of course, if you're careful with it, it's not a big deal. And once it's pushed in, this is pretty sturdy. Now, the only thing is that as well, this particular flap piece just kind of rests over the function there. You can push it all the way down when it's like this, but once you push it this way, the flag piece pushes up, and when you reset it, you just have to push it back down again, or else there's a very unsightly gap. The cockpit also has a bit of a wiggle to it. I'm not necessarily sure if this was intentional. I'm going to assume it was, but you can actually pop the cockpit out very easily. It's just mounted on mixel joints, and this kind of works as an escape glider of its own or a mini glider. It does have the wings, the actual Bionicle Mystica wings recolored in the pearl gold, which is great to see, but you can kind of treat this as its own flyer as well. Now, keeping with the dragon motif of the rest of the ninja vehicles, this set does have one of the dual molded dragon heads, the gold and transparent light blue on the front of the cockpit there, which I think is a really nice touch. I actually really like how well it's integrated into the set itself. I think it all just feels like a very seamless kind of front nose for the jet, and this is easily one of the better Ninjago sets we've gotten at the $30 price point in recent history. Now, in my personal opinion, the legacy version of the Kai Fighter, which we also just got a couple years back, is a little bit better than this one, as well as the legacy version of Jay's Stormfighter, but those both benefited from a higher price point. For $30, this is alright. $25 would have been fantastic, but I can see where the value is coming from here. The set also introduces several recurring pieces for the Crystalized Wave, as we also saw in the motorcycle. These are special slope pieces with dragon scales on them to really hone in on the dragon aesthetic. Now, what's also special is that they also recolored these spinner crowns, the OG ones from 2012, in light aqua or light blue, which is also a very nice touch. Now, if I had one minor complaint about the set, it's that the transform feature feels a little bit awkward to fly with. The way the blades are splayed out feels a little bit odd to me, specifically with the ones sticking out in the back here. And honestly, I kind of feel like the entire set would have been improved if they simply left these blades off. That way, it is a much more streamlined jet, as you can see here. You really have the blades kind of tucked away and hidden. It's not obvious that it even has hidden blades. And then the transformation feature feels like a surprise to have the blades come out as wings, like this mode, instead of having the odd crisscross pattern. Now, I do believe that the crisscross was intentional. If you actually look at the description of the set on Lego.com, they said that the transformed version resembles a shuriken, specifically in the way that the spikes angle outwards. So I kind of get what they were going for, but I think that leaving the back blades off is just a cooler set in my opinion. With that though, we can now move on to the next set. Now this is where things, in my opinion, start to get a little bit rough. This is Cole's Golden Cruiser. It retails for $45 and comes with 3 minifigures, the Golden Ninja version of Cole, Asphyra the Snake Sorceress, as well as Kai in his dragon outfit. One thing I do appreciate is, again, LEGO is being very intentional in pairing up specific villains with specific rivals. Kai in particular has a grudge against Asphyra because she stole his powers, and it's very obvious that they wanted to pair the two characters up in a set like this for them to battle. Now, this is probably one of my favorite versions of the Dragon Ninjas out of all of the 4 of them. The transparent red just looks so good as a contrast color against the pearl gold there. I love the way that the wings look. It just looks really majestic seeing the trans red mixed with the golden. And of course, getting those minifig components in transparent red is a treat as well. Now, of course, Asphyra is a good enough figure on her own, but definitely could have been improved. I really wish that we would eventually get a snake tail version of Asphyra. She never really had a smoke trail in the show. Sure, there were some fire elements when she was introduced, but for the most part, she just had a very solid tail, which we haven't really seen in any official figures. Cole, on the other hand, is very solid in the ninja outfit. I just like the way that the golden outfits look in general, which I talked a lot about in the actual figures video. Now, taking the unweaponed version of Cole, you can actually place him inside the vehicle. One thing I do want to note is that this vehicle reuses the very recent, or somewhat recent, 6-stud wide Speed Champions car chassis, which means you can place him in, and there is actually room for a second person to sit as a passenger. It does not come with a passenger, but if you wanted to include one, you could if you chose. Now, putting him up here, there is Cole in his car. Let's set aside the figures and zoom in on the car itself. Now, to be completely honest, this is probably one of my least favorite vehicles from the entire wave. It's not a bad vehicle by any means, I just don't really see necessarily if there's anything that specifically sets us apart. If we take a look back to previous Cole vehicles, he had, say, the Rock Rotor from 2016's Day of the Departed wave, which was an awesome vehicle in a very similar buggy-like setup to this, but that also had spring-loaded suspension for the front and back of the vehicle, and also a wheel on the underside of the car that actually activated a drill or stud shooter on the front when you pressed it all the way down. Now that was a really cool function-packed car. This one just feels a little bit strange in terms of just being a standard car, not much you can actually play around with, and it does have one action feature which is somewhat transformative. If you angle the blades forwards, you can kind of push them forwards like this, although this does not really transform the car's look and feel to me in a very significant manner for me personally. I guess this is supposed to be some sort of an attack mode, but it also just leaves the back feeling somewhat bare, and there's a lot of very awkward and strange design choices made with this set in particular. Specifically, they use the LEGO Technic cable connector piece, that's this piece right here, which really only appears in Technic sets that are motorized for cables, and they don't really do anything with it. It is in red, which is very, very obvious against here, and it literally is just there for the blades to rest against. I guess it's there to make sure that the blades don't clash with the wheels, but they wouldn't really clash because there's enough space between them. I don't know why they used that piece in particular, just feels like a very odd parts choice to me. They also have the specific friction version of the single stud add-on pieces for Technic, which is new for this year. Great piece down here. But I also don't know why that is there in red. Just feels like a strange decision to me, maybe to make it so that younger builders would easily know that they have to put the axle through the middle slot. If I had to guess, that's why it's there. But again, having it in red feels very, very odd. Now, the set itself does have an opening front cab right here, so you can lift this open. They did actually include a miniature hammer for Cole. I do like this. I really like that they actually have a hammer for Cole in there. That is a very nice touch. But of course, once you close it up, not too much going on in the front here. I guess they were supposed to trying to make it look like a dragon, specifically with the eyes here as the headlights. And I guess that maybe around the sides here with that transparent piece, it's meant to look like the eye of a dragon with the teeth, but it's a little bit hard to make out. And if I wasn't specifically looking for dragon motifs, I would not have noticed it in the set. Of course, the set is not all bad. You have a really great recolored Speed Champions windscreen here in transparent orange. That is a really cool feature to see. And I do like some of the color scheme choices with the orange and black. It is just a very predominant orange color on the front, which just feels a little bit overwhelming. Maybe mixing that in with some gold and black, even with stickers, would have improved it, but the very colorful front definitely feels a little bit out of place to me. Now, they do include the new version of the stud shooters on the back here. This is the kind where new for 2022, but technically appeared in 2021 for the Batman movie sets. You can specifically press the button on the side and it will shoot a projectile out. Unfortunately, that also means that you're specifically supposed to actuate the function by moving around this lever here. And the way it works is you kind of press down on this piece here to make it work, and vice versa. You can specifically take your finger here and press down on this piece to swing the blades back. But that also means that by pressing your finger on the center here, whether intentionally or not, you will splay these outwards, because as you can see, if I'm pressing my thumb down, that is pushing these out of their studs. It feels a little bit awkward to me and not very ergonomic. Certainly, usually LEGO does tend to kind of account for stuff like this, but for whatever reason, they did not do it on this set. So it is a bit strange to activate the transformation feature like so, because you will be splaying apart the guns, which are very awkward to push back, because again, pushing them on the sides will cause them to fire. So just a strange build in general. There were a lot of good ideas that went into it, and I like the idea of having the blades flip down for a transformation feature. It's just kind of something we've seen before and doesn't really feel too special to me, especially compared to some of the other Cole vehicles, which I feel were better than this one particular set. And again, at $45 US, this feels incredibly overpriced. I could easily see this coming in at 30, 35, maybe even 40 if you're pushing it, but 40 is really pushing it for 3 figures and 1 car. 45 for something like this is kind of ridiculous, and it just feels like one of the more overpriced sets of the wave, which I wouldn't mind if it was actually a good set, but it's kind of just an average mediocre set, so that's really why it is one of my least favorites of the wave. However, this set, for the Bionicle fans out there, reintroduced the Borak eyepiece in Pearl Gold, which previously only appeared in one of the rarest Bionicle Titan sets, Brutaka. So hey, that's really great because this set includes 4 of the new toothpiece in Pearl Gold. So great to see that make a return. It was last seen in 2006, 2007. Now in 2022, we are finally getting it back again. So thanks LEGO for doing that. Oh, and before we move on, just one note, the set did also include a 4th figure, the Vengestone Brute there, but again, doesn't really change my mind in terms of how overpriced the set is. The inclusion of 1 General Mook villain doesn't really change that, but thankfully it did include 4 figures instead of 3, so it is slightly better value than I initially thought. Alright, so this next set here is simply titled The Crystal King. It features the main villain for Crystalized, the Overlord in his Crystal King form, in a centaur winged dragon form, and it also comes with 5 figures. Lloyd Harumi, who has somehow made it back from the dead, 2 different versions of the Vengestone Brutes, one of them with armor, which is pretty rare to see, and a 2-armed version of the Crystal King, who has been modified to allow him to fit inside of the cockpit of the main kind of build here. Although I don't really think that's a cockpit, this is more supposed to be him, and he evolved into this type of being, but it's just there in order for kids to place him in. Now, the minifigure selection is very nice here because, again, they include the 2 rivals for the minifigures, the main heroes and the villains, specifically with Lloyd and Harumi here. They do have a lot of history dying back to season 8 and 9, and despite her being presumed dead, she is now back for season 15. Now, the Overlord himself does come in this particular 2-armed version, which we do talk about extensively for the minifigure review, but it is interesting how they made a brand new variant for the figure who isn't just the standard one with the special arm attachment removed for this set. They actually recolored the armor piece in gunmetal gray for this character and gave him shorter arms as well. Not sure if he'll appear in the show, but here he is in this particular form. Now, moving on to the actual set itself, this is one of the more interesting builds for a Ninjago villain set. We've never really gotten something like it where it is specifically meant to be a centaur-like creature, which is really interesting to see as a build. And was LEGO able to pull it off? I'm not necessarily 100% sure. There are a lot of good ideas behind it, but unfortunately, the set is limited by one major flaw. the legs, specifically the front legs, cannot move and are fully fixed. So despite them actually having the special new ball joint piece, which they easily could have introduced for this particular set, they chose to just fix the legs at a particular angle, which means that, as you can see, they are just mounted on Technic axles here, and you cannot bend the legs whatsoever, which means that posing this is very, very difficult. If you want to get it into a cool pose, you can, but you can't really move the legs outside of kind of wiggling them or making them waddle back and forth. Even the joint on the legs is the fixed joint from the core sets, so you cannot actually bend the knees here. It literally just kind of wobbles around just like this, kind of reminiscent to some of the classic Lego sculptures that we got back in like the 90s. Of course, you can move the back legs, but not really too much you can do with them because the front legs cannot be moved. I do like that you can move them, and you are able to get some sort of a walking pose like this just by placing that leg up and this leg back, but it just really suffers by having the front legs be completely immoving. Now, the specific way the arms work is a little bit odd as well, because they have the ball joints for the elbows mounted at this angle, which means that you can't really bend his elbow past this particular degree of motion. Sure, you can rotate it like this, then you can bend it all the way up, like so, but then it also exposes the underside of the studs here, which isn't ideal as well. So all in all, a very strange build for the villain set here. I love the idea of a set like this, but I think it definitely could have been a lot better. And actually looking at some of the leaked preliminary images, which showcased a much larger, more elaborate build for the staff, a much more complex building technique for the head, and much beefier legs that probably could have moved, I definitely feel like this suffered a lot from cutting on the budget in terms of when they were trying to make these sets a little bit smaller to fit the price points they were given. Now, this does have a few cool building techniques with it. I really love the way that these particular angle pieces work together. As you can see here on the waist of the character, all of these different slope pieces work really nicely together, and if you have it perfectly lined up, you can really just get it to be fully seamless. Now, this is a bit of a fragile technique. If you just kind of brush it, it's very easy to brush it off to the side like so, which is a little bit awkward, but as long as you really just get the angles up like that, this is a very satisfying thing to put together to really make the angles work, and the geometry of these Lego pieces is very satisfying. Of course, as we continue up to the rib cage of the model, I like that they actually brick built the ribs themselves, which is reminiscent of the original Overlord design. And of course, you have these upper elements right here as well, so which you can splay outwards to actually open up the inside part for the Overlord figure himself. And it does actually appear that there's some sort of a chair in there as well. Of course, closing up the chest cavity of this creature, one of my favorite things about it is the head. Despite it being a little bit scaled back compared to the original head that we saw in the preliminary images, I love the usage of the cow bull horns here as eyes. It is very menacing. It really looks like this has a very distinct shrouded face inside this large helmet. You can see that they use the sausage piece as eyebrows, which is also a really great parts usage there. And all in all, this is one of the coolest brick-built heads we have gotten for a large-scale Lego build in a long time. I really love the way that the horns also protrude out of the top of the head. It gives it a very menacing look, and you can even specifically angle the pieces on the helmet here if you just want it to have different designs. Say you want it to be fully closed up, you can do it like that. If you want a slightly more open air kind of look, you can angle them downwards like so. You can really make it your own, which I personally prefer to leave it kind of like this, like a knight's helmet, which just looks really cool for the character in general, and I cannot wait to see how that translates to the TV show itself. In contrast, one of my least favorite parts about the set are the way that the wings are built. I like the inclusion of wings given the Overlord's roots as a dragon, but these are just really bare bone, and honestly, I cannot believe that this would actually sustain any sort of flight. You literally just have one of the large blade pieces, which is new for this season, sticking out here, a very obvious angle, and one of these smaller blades sticking out here. They are very airy wings. I don't necessarily know if in the show maybe they'll pretend these are just spikes or something, but as wings, they don't really do the trick for me. They also feel very horizontally located here, as you can see on the front here. Despite them being mounted on joints, they are really just flat wings, so they don't really arc up. Even something like this maybe would have been a little bit better, but they are just flat horizontal, which is a bit of a con to me. Now moving onwards to the back of the character itself, he does have a fully articulatable tail here with some of the transparent pink crystal spikes. The tail is pretty good, nothing too groundbreaking, but nothing really to complain about either. And I also do love the shaping of the body. Even the torso is really good. It's just the legs and the wings that leaves a lot to be desired. The torso build is great. I like how it really does feel like an organic creature curving downwards here. I like the shaping being used for all the different layers, and even the backside doesn't look too bad. It just feels more like a statue than something you can actually play with. At least you can splay the toes out. That is actually pretty nice, and it's really cool actually being able to put the toes outwards. As one of the representations of the main villains of the wave, it is a very interesting concept, but ultimately falls a little bit flat. Still, it is cool that we actually got a large-scale model dedicated to the Crystal King himself. Now, in terms of the price, 60 euros seems very fair for something like this. 50 or 55 would have been better. 70 in the US is definitely way too high for the set, and actually due to the price increases, that may actually increase even more, which will come into effect in September, so that is not a nice thing to me. I really do feel that this is a little bit overpriced in the US in particular, but not nearly as bad as some of the other sets we're about to take a look at. With that, we have summed up our look at the Crystal King, so we can now move on to the next set. Next up, we have the set that retails for around $80 US. This is the Crystal King Temple. It includes the large four-armed version of the Overlord or Crystal King, one of his minions with particular shoulder armor here in transparent pink, which is not present on all of the minions, and the 4 unique ninja suits. These are the 4 minifigures that are unique to the set in these standard outfits for Kai, Jay, Zayn, and Cole, which is really great because these are the main suits we've pretty much seen them wear in the first 12 episodes of Crystalized. The set also includes a small little side dragon build for one of the crystallized creatures, as well as the floating temple design in general. So of course, setting aside the figures, which may I add, very nice to get the full team for the original ninja in their unique outfits for this set in particular. You get all of them in this set. Let's take a look at the actual build. Now this build actually comes in 2 distinct parts. There is a front section, and they are not attached. There's the front section right here, and if you press a lever here, you can kind of swing a staircase over to the middle section. Although this staircase doesn't really go anywhere, so I guess maybe that's supposed to destroy the staircase rather than swing it over. Now, I do want to start off with the middle tower in particular, because that is kind of the main focus of the set. So moving that aside and taking a look at the tower here. Specifically, this is supposed to be a floating temple. We've seen some glimpses of this in the trailer and box art. It's meant to be the Oni temple from Primeval's Eye from Season 8, if fan theories are to be believed. But as you can see here, they actually recolored the LEGO Technic beams in transparent pink, which is really interesting. Very rare to see a transparent color for Technic beams, but it makes sense for the crystalline growths of this particular build. Of course, you're supposed to imagine that this entire thing is kind of floating or hovering in midair, so if you kind of ignore this section, just imagine that this is floating in its own vortex. It also has the tensegrity prison cell, which I guess is also supposed to represent a floating structure, which is pretty cool. The first time LEGO has officially introduced tensegrity in one of their official LEGO sets, which works out pretty well, but I definitely think they could have done it for a larger structure. Having it for just a small prison cage kind of defeats the purpose. And of course, you do have a massive throne for the Crystal King up at the top here, so you can either place him standing right there very menacingly, or you can even have him seated in his throne, so there is a space for him to sit while holding all of his swords as well. So there he is on his throne. They also use the lamppost pieces, which are inverted, which is a very nice part usage to mount this kind of large ornamental structure on the top there. And then of course 2 of the large crystal blades on the back to round off the overall look and feel of the temple itself. One thing that the temple has are holding spots for each of the 4 golden weapons. As you can see here in the center, you have the Scythe of Quakes, and the rest of the 3 weapons are held on the front part. Now, as a standalone tower, this is pretty cool. Definitely does feel a little bit bare bones to me, especially around this area on the sides. It's very obvious that this is just a structure that is held up by the beams here, although they did try to hide it by some great studs on the side building techniques, with specifically including some of these pieces here upside down and on the side to really try to evoke this kind of floating rock version of the Crystal King's temple. And of course, you can open the prison up to put a minifigure in as well. One of my favorite things about it is actually this little dino build. I actually have him attached to the chain there, so it's a little bit hard to take him off, but let's just get him off here. I mean, the little dragon build here. It's just a very cute little dragon, or almost like a little baby menacing dragon. For crystals here, you can see some crystals growing out of the front of its head. Just a nice build to have in general for just one of these side antagonists to maybe hassle the ninja when they first approach the temple itself. Of course, this is one of the more bare bones structures, so we can move on to the main front section here. So the way the front section works is that you have an initial staircase, so let's kind of tilt this down so we can take a look at this closer. You have some blade pieces here that are supposed to be blocking your passage, and then you can kind of make them be blocked up or slice the ninja as they go through. These pieces here are specifically just platforms that are mounted at strange angles to mimic the floating style of things. At first, I was very excited because I thought this was actually a play feature or something on gears, but no, these just kind of float here. You just kind of angle them whichever way you want. The way it's supposed to work is that you claim the shurikens of ice first, which are mounted on the center here, and you jump upwards, kind of balance on the floating platforms to get the sword of fire, and then you go all the way up to claim the nunchucks of lightning. But watch out, because pressing the golden Borak eye here will cause the stairs to lunge onto the side. This will go downwards, and of course just putting it back will reset it. That's actually a cool play feature right there. Probably a little over-engineered, but it works for what it is. And of course, be careful because you may be standing right here, but there is specifically a point where the ninja are pushed off. Very simple play feature, but you use this rod to push them off. If they're standing in the wrong place, they will just fly right off. So let's just do that to Jay. Boom, he has been ejected from the Temple of the Crystal King. So all of this does come together. There isn't really a nice way to put it. I guess some of the wedges do align up, so this is probably the most official configuration you are going to get. But again, as you can see here, for $80 US, this feels very bare bones to me. I am honestly a little disappointed in the temple itself, because if you look at the preliminary images, which did appear in some certain websites that they accidentally put it up, this was originally a much beefier build. I'm not exactly sure what happened during production to make it go from a very beefy, solid build to this kind of bare bones build right here, especially for $80. Feels a little bit overpriced to me. This honestly kind of just feels like a worse version of the Season 12 Prime Empire Temple of Madness, which at least was kind of one cohesive structure and had some arcade play to it. This feels a little disjointed to me, even though it is a cool aesthetic for a set. A floating temple is a really fun idea for Ninjago. I do just feel that they really could have benefited from either having a more solid build or just simply increasing the price point. I would have loved to see this build at, say, a $100 price point or even $120, because they really would have been able to make this a much more solid, fleshed out build. And I hope that sometime in the future, LEGO will decide to take notes from one of their other themes, specifically Monkey Kid, in terms of making original LEGO playsets, because they're honestly blowing away Ninjago in their playsets compared to stuff like this. With that though, let's now move on to the next set. Alright, so next up here is one of the more expensive sets of the wave. This is Kai's Golden Dragon Raider, retailing for a whopping $90 US. This is pretty much just focused on the central large vehicle for Kai. The set comes with 7 minifigures, specifically the Golden Ninja version of Kai, the Golden Dragon version of Zayn, Mr. F here, as well as Skylar on the ninja team, plus the 3 different Vengestone brutes. I spent a lot of time talking about this in the minifig section, so I won't really go over them again too much in detail. I'll just say that the Golden Dragon version of Zayn is easily one of my favorites. I am always partial to Zayn, but I think that the transparent light blue works really great in conjunction with the pearl gold, and the transparent blue limbs looks really awesome as well. Mr. F receives an upgrade in the form of purple eyes, plus the special new helmet mold introduced for holding masks on for this wave. He looks suitably menacing there, although I do wish that he had the new biker helmet that he has in the TV show. Skylar is always great to get as a side character, featuring different expressions as well. This time you have an angry expression with face paint, and then you have a more happy expression like this, which really does suit the character very well. And lastly, the golden versions of the ninja are some of my favorite outfits for this entire wave as a whole. But of course, the main thing in question is the specific Kai vehicle itself. So setting aside the weaponed up version of Kai here, we will take the weaponless one. Let's open up the cockpit and place him inside. You'll notice there are seats for 2 specifically to hold Kai and Skylar. So let's just kind of put him up here first, set Skylar aside for now, place him inside the cockpit right there, and move all of these to the side. So this is a very strange vehicle, and at first glance, this looks really cool. I mean, the way that the wheels are splayed out, while not necessarily very practical, looks really interesting to me. I love that the way that this feels very aggressive with the open-wheeled stance here. You have actually the ability to angle the wheels in the back, so if you want to change the way this vehicle works as profiled, you can either drive it like this, which is fully flat, just like this on the ground actually, or you can have it be tilted all the way up to get a really completely different angle and look and feel for the vehicle. Just all sorts of really fun things you can do with the back wheel, which by moving it around, you can achieve different looks for the vehicle itself. It also has an armored up version, which presumably, as you can see here, you can actually have the armor piece either just be on the back there, kind of as the tank mode, or you can kind of raise it upwards to cover the front glass to really armor it up, and twisting a knob at the back allows you to transform the side blades to push them forwards, and they transform into missiles as well, so you can shoot those spring missiles like so. Unfortunately, this does come with a lot of very strange design choices, and I was kind of baffled after I built this as to what exactly LEGO was thinking when they put this together. So let's just reset this all back to the way that it appears on the box art here. As you can see, the wheels are currently splayed outwards. They're on hinge joints, so you can push them forwards, kind of roll this back and forth just like a standard car vehicle, which you can see right here. This works great, but feels a little bit strange how boxed up it is. This feels like a very vertical type look. This to me looks a lot cooler, and it's the way that it's shown driving on the box art. You can actually kind of splay this out. You can see it has a much more aggressive stance, has a lot more interesting things going on, and makes you wonder what sorts of cool things is this hiding. Well, the answer is unfortunately nothing, because as you can see, even just splayed out just a little bit, you can splay them all the way out if you want, but just splayed out like this, if you try to drive it forwards on literally any surface, let's just start from the back here, and push this forwards, the wheels will automatically splay out and it will just break. So this just cannot move at all. You can't move it forwards, the wheels have a lot of grip, it's just stuck like this. If you move it backwards, then they will kind of go backwards again into this position. They won't ever really snap back to the standard vertical, but this is kind of just useless because, as you can see, despite how cool it looks, all it does is just elaborately break the vehicle. You can't really do anything with it. This doesn't really look cool on its own. Maybe if it was a walker type thing, it would look interesting, but as it is, I have no idea what exactly this is supposed to be. Maybe it will make more sense in the show itself. We have seen this in the TV show already, and it literally just looked like it was at an angle but driving fine. You cannot drive it fine at an angle, even if just one of them is splayed out, which looks kind of strange, but you can splay out one of them. That's immediately, as you can see, going to splay to the side and then stop the vehicle from actually moving forwards. So there's too much grip on the wheels themselves, and I think what it was intended was that, as you can see here, you can kind of make it roll forwards at an angle. So if you really force it, you can kind of do it like that. But as soon as the other one goes like this, that is it. You can't move it whatsoever. It will just break like this. I really wish there was a way to roll this forwards in this configuration. Imagine this rolling forwards. That would look really cool, but as it is, there's too much weight placed on the front such that you can't actually do anything with this without it literally just breaking like that. Now, maybe you can play around with it by making the back really fall all the way downwards like this, by pushing the back wheels all the way down. Perhaps that will take some weight off of the front here, which allows you to potentially roll it forwards, which I guess this kind of works. This is rolling somewhat, but it's kind of cheating because there's actually some wheels on the bottom here. As you can see, there are some cheater wheels on the bottom, which I guess that's why they're there, is to allow it to roll forwards like this. But it feels very strange that even just raising up the back wheels just by 1 or 2 clicks will immediately cause this to just stop working and splay apart by rolling it forwards. I love the idea for the function and having a vehicle that looks like this. The execution just isn't quite there. And I definitely would have preferred it if they literally had just removed the joints, mounted these at fixed angles, and then kind of just forced it to roll forwards like this. That would have been much more interesting than what it is right now, because you can't even roll it forwards whatsoever without it just splaying outwards like that. Just a very odd design in general. Of course, outside of that, this is probably one of my favorite looking vehicles, aesthetically speaking. I love the very unique design of this. It is a very unique and iconic design right here. I love the way that you have a lot of things you can do with it. You can, again, twist the back to cause the guns to splay forwards. You can put it into tank mode by raising down the spikes here. Of course, you do even have a drone on the back that can fly outwards. So this is a little bit of a drone to aid in combat that just detaches from the back and clips right onto there, just in the back like that. That is all really cool. And I also like how you can actually change the angle of this wheel in particular so that you can actually roll it along like this. There goes one of the missiles, that's gone forever. And just have it sort of work when it's very much low down to the ground. Obviously, again, cheating because these wheels aren't really even touching the ground itself, but I guess it is what it is. Of course, this is a very flawed vehicle, but it does look cool aesthetically speaking, which is why it's very much a mixed vehicle for me. Looks really cool, but doesn't really function too well. However, for $90 US, the price is pretty ridiculous. I do not know why this is so expensive. In fact, LEGO recently announced that they are upping the price for this to $100 US. So they heard all the complaints that this is overpriced and they made it $10 more expensive. It is very strange that LEGO is doing this retroactively. I don't know why this particular set is so expensive, because even if you look at the parts count, the value simply is not there. For $90, I would recommend waiting for a sale on this. Occasionally, Ninjago sets do go on sale if you wait long enough, and for something that doesn't really even work when you steer it forwards, as you can see here, it kind of just breaks like so, I definitely feel like there were a lot of improvements that could have been made to this set in particular. Now, of course, this does try to continue along with the dragon motif. I guess if you kind of squint, the engines sort of look like dragon eyes. This maybe looks like some sort of a mouth here, but you do really have to squint. It's not as obvious as the other vehicles. However, I do like the way they did the cockpit. It just feels very reminiscent of, say, a LEGO Exoforce set with this style of cockpit being used, just going forwards as one big chunk and then sliding onwards like this. Cool concept, very cool looking aesthetically, just kind of poor execution when it comes to the front wheels being very easy to splay out like so. With that, let's now move on to the next set. Alright, so up next is Nia's Samurai X Mech. This is a set that retails for $120 US and includes multiple different exclusive minifigures, including the crystallized version of Pythor, as well as a new version of Nia Samurai X, Garmadon in his Oni form, Sensei Wu in battle armor, Nelson in the resistance armor, and really the only minifigures that return from existing sets are the standard Vengestone Brute here, as well as the Golden Ninja version of Jay, who specifically appears in the set because he does not appear in his own vehicle in the standard golden outfit. Instead, the J motorcycle, as you saw at the beginning of the video, has the dragon version. The set includes a large build for the Nia mech in general, as well as a smaller creature build for the crystallized faction. I don't know exactly if this will even appear in the show in its current form, but it is kind of interesting to see as a build itself. Of course, setting the figures aside because we talked about those a ton in the other video, let's first take a look at this smaller creature here. Now, I actually am kind of liking this a lot more than I initially thought I would. It is very strange how this does not have any printing on the eyes. It feels very odd to just have no printing whatsoever for this particular creature's face, but maybe they were trying to go for this kind of odd or eerie statue come to life look, which I guess makes sense. You even have a lower jaw that is just a standard slope brick to kind of simulate the mouth, although you cannot open and close the jaw. You can, however, move the spikes up and down should you wish, so you can do that if you want. It's all ball joint piece, so you can really just move everything around. Has some semblance of wings or spikes growing out the side of it, like so. You can kind of angle those back and forth, and you can really get this in really cool poses because he has a lot of joints. The mixel joints on the back of the legs can really allow you to achieve all sorts of poses with this, like crawling along the ground with one arm raised up. It's just a cool look to have for a creature like this in general. Obviously doesn't really stand any sort of chance against the mech, but I like how they actually included a separate side build for the villains as well, no matter how small it is. And it definitely is a lot more interesting than the previous small villain side build we got for a large mech, with the Ninja Ultra Combo Mech having a very strange snake vehicle. But specifically going on to the mech, this is one of the most technically impressive mechs they have ever done for Ninjago because despite it being such a large scale, it features knees. So this is pretty cool because you can actually move the legs all the way back and forth. You have the full range of motion here, and the knees can be bent to 90 degrees, which is really awesome to see. What isn't so awesome though is the fact that it is very, very restricted on the lower feet. In fact, the designer of the set itself said they had to make some compromises by including knees. They had to really restrict the feet to allow it to very easily stand up and not very easily topple over. As you can see, pretty much despite what I just did there, you can just take it from any position, wiggle the legs around, plop it down, and for the most part, it will stand. And that's because the restriction around the ankles is extremely limited to the point where you can't even bend the legs back and forth. As you can see here, the feet are pretty much locked to just this. You can barely bend them back and forth, which unfortunately kind of negates the concept of knees. The way that knees would normally work is that you could actually have this bent forwards and then bend this forwards as well to allow it to be in a walking pose. However, since the feet are pretty much fixed, the knees can't really do anything, and maybe you can bend both of them to get some sort of pose out there, but for the most part, they're pretty much fixed as is, which is a bit of a con, but I understand why they had to do it. Now, the set also introduces the Seabound windscreen cover molded in a new blend with pearl gold and black for the first time as knee covers. This is really cool. I love the piece usages for the knee pads here, and this actually was teased by the designer last year on Twitter. He said that he came up with a very cool usage of the Seabound windscreen part, and you can see it in action right here. Now, the color scheme for the mech is very interesting. You have a dark azure color scheme, which is Nia's primary color. However, on the lower limbs, specifically the elbows and lower legs, you have a black and gold color scheme, which is not really a color I would associate with Nia or Samurai X. You also have a very predominant red X on the center for Samurai X. Feels a little out of place to just have a very bright red piece here. All in all, the color scheme is a little bit odd for this one, despite it being a very cool build. I certainly wish that maybe some of the pieces were instead, say, gunmetal, or something that ties a little bit closer back to Nia's original color scheme, because as it is, it just feels a little bit cluttered to me. That being said, the black and gold looks really cool. I kind of wish that they made just a black and gold mech in general, maybe for Cole, but all in all, it is very interesting to get this fully posed up. As you can see, the sword elements used are the new pieces introduced for Crystalized, which are these large blade pieces right here. The upper arms are mounted on the newer style of ball joint, which has been introduced for 2022 for easier mech building. You can see right here, let's put this back on here, that you can really get a lot of articulation out of that. So you can bend it upwards and downwards, backwards and forwards, just like that. So you can really get the full range of motion out of the arm here, which is very cool to see. Of course, that is one of my favorite things about this. You can really get the arms fully angled up, and thankfully the shoulder armor is mounted on the arms itself, and it itself is mounted on mixile joints, so you can really just get these in the perfect poses, and even use them as missile pods should you wish. Now, moving onwards to the back of the model, it has some sort of a cloth, or almost like a simulation of a cloth comma on the back. Of course, it's fully brick built, but it does work such that if you move the legs, the armor plates bend backwards and then bend forwards, although of course you do need to reset it back when it's done, just like so. I just like the inclusion of those pieces there. I think that is really cool to see in general. And I also really appreciate that the designer actually took a lot of effort to actually make the back of the torso detailed. You can see it really has a very defined armored spine on the back here. You have even the back armor pieces mounted on the mixile joints to accommodate the leg movement. Everything feels fully enclosed, and the color scheme, no matter how odd, feels very nicely wrapped up on the back. Now, honestly, one of the weaker parts of the set itself to me personally is the upper head. Sometimes the Ninjago mechs have really interesting and cool head designs, but this one just feels a little bit too blocky for me in particular. As you can see here, there isn't really a defined set of eyes or lights here. On the show itself, they actually have, as we can see in the trailers and some brief glimpses in the episodes, a much cooler facial design with more prominent eyes and whatnot, but this is a little bit strange. It feels very blocky and square wedge-like, although it does get the job done fairly okay. Now, the entire thing does flip up to reveal the cockpit on the inside, with some very charming stickers showcasing the development of the Samurai X suit and the original painting that Nia got that inspired her to become Samurai X again after losing her water powers. Zooming backwards out for the mech as well, you can see this is a very, very large and dominating structure. It certainly is one of the largest Ninjago mechs they've ever done. It is the most expensive mech they have ever made for Ninjago, but the question is, does it earn the price of $120? And honestly, I really don't think it does. For $120, a mech of this scale probably would have needed to be a lot larger for me in particular. It does have a lot of pieces and feels very formidable, but we have seen very similarly detailed mechs for literally half the price beforehand, namely with Zane's Titan mech, which we got for Ninjago Legacy just last year, and even the Ninja Ultra Combo mech was of a similar stature to this, had a lot of pieces as well, but also was a lot cheaper. So the price on this one does not necessarily feel earned to me. I love the way the mech is built. I think the arms are really cool, despite the legs not being able to be posed up too well. The inclusion of the knee joints on triple ball joints is great to see, and you can actually get some good poses out of it because of that. It just definitely needed to be a lot cheaper in my opinion. But with that, we can now move on to the final Ninjago Crystalized set. Alright, and for our final set, we have Lloyd's Golden Dragon for $140. What's great about the minifigure selection is that this set includes the main villain, the Crystal King Overlord. It includes the special Oni version of Lloyd, all 4 of the original ninja, Kai, Jay, Zayn, and Cole in their golden suits, and 3 standard minions for them to fight. The set also includes as a side build a throne of the golden weapons for Lloyd. I don't know why Lloyd needs a throne, but he has that right there as shown in the box art, which may be a little bit misleading, but that is shown for the character there. And of course, the main focus of the set is the large golden dragon itself. So setting aside all the minifigures, just to take a very quick look at the throne, it is a very simple build. It just factors in all of the different golden weapon pieces, the Scythe of Quakes, Sword of Fire, Nunchucks of Lightning, and Shurikens of Ice here. Very, very simple style of build, but you just have it all together in a crystallized platform, kind of an evil looking throne right here. And then of course you have the main attraction. So this is the 4-headed dragon right here. A lot of people have speculated that the heads are actually the embodiments of the ninja themselves in their dragon forms, because you can actually see the facial features of some of the ninja in some of the dragon heads. Specifically, the fire one has Kai's scar, so we will see if that actually will be a plot point. Obviously, none of this has been revealed in the show whatsoever as of yet, but I'm very excited to see exactly how this all works. Now, unfortunately, the wings are not flappable. You cannot move the wings up and down. However, it does make up for it by having a pretty cool feature. Twisting the gear up here allows you to flap the wings sideways, which is something that is completely unique to this model. I have never seen anything like it. It is using a very innovative building technique of literally putting a vehicle tire in there, like that's a car tire, and one of the Technic quarter circle gears, and one of the Bionicle creature gears here, and making them all work in conjunction to cause the wings to be able to be folded up. Certainly, it doesn't necessarily look the best in flight or in action. I don't know how realistic this sort of flying function works, but it does look really good folded up, and moving very quickly, it can kind of look like it's flying like that. So all in all, a very cool function to have. I really do like how much effort was put into actually making this a real function. Unfortunately, because of that, they again have made it such that you cannot move the wings up and down, which means the wings are permanently angled at a downwards motion. I personally think it would have been really cool to literally just take this particular piece here, which is just a standard Technic beam, instead just have a ball joint sticking out there, and be able to attach it on a ball joint like so, just with a friction joint from the Hero Factory Bionicle stuff, so you could actually move the wings back and forth and flap it up and down, while still retaining the feature. It's a pretty light feature. You easily could have mounted it on a ball joint without having it collapse under the weight, and I really do think that would have added a lot of value to the set in general. That being said, it is a pretty easy mod to make on your own. I absolutely will be doing it when I get back to my parts collection at home. It's just something I wish was included in the original set. Although I do understand the designers not wanting to do that to make it easier to actuate the mechanism without any risk of it falling apart. Now you can see the wings flapping back and forth here while turning the spinner crowns, and really that is just the main function of the set. They do include a brand new joint element introduced for the Horizon Forbidden West tall neck creature, which is right in there to allow you to mount the joints at an even more compact range to really allow you to swing the body back and forth. The tail can also be moved up and down for the most part, not really side to side unfortunately, but it does not have the free moving hinges. Instead, these are the click hinges, which is great to see. And of course, you can just rotate the back end of the tail as well. Now, one thing I love about this dragon is that unlike many other creatures from both this wave and other Ninjago waves, all 4 of the legs are mounted on ball joints, and you can get a lot of movement out of them. As you can see here, you can splay the legs back and forth and move it right here, so up and down and back and forth, side to side like so, to really get a realistic range of motion. Unfortunately, you cannot move this joint, but I do feel that having a joint there probably would have made it a little bit unstable in terms of just making it fall over too easily. You can also, however, move the back joints on these same ball joint pieces that they introduced for the year of 2022, the ratchet joint pieces right there. And of course, each of the feet are mounted on the newer molding of the Bionicle style ball joints, which is great to see LEGO still investing in updating the mold used for the standard Bionicle ball joint piece. Now, the main attraction are the heads themselves, and I love how each of the heads is built just a little bit differently. They are using the prefab dragon head pieces that they've introduced in recent years to really make up the composition here, but every single one is done just a little bit differently to really make it feel unique. The Zayn one, for instance, has the dual molded gold and transparent blue upper part, but one of the bulkier lower jaws. The Cole one is using literally two of the same piece to have a much more rocky and beefy exterior. The Kai one feels more like a regal dragon here with a much more streamlined lower jaw as well as the specially molded upper jaw, and the J one combines both the Zayn and Kai heads by having the same lower jaw as Kai and the same upper jaw as Zayn. So all in all, they do feel very distinct. That being said, I do feel like the head on the Lloyd's Legendary Dragon from earlier this year was just done a little bit better for me personally. I really don't like it when LEGO just tries to rely too much on these prefab large molded pieces, because it just feels very awkward to me how they are just attached by these standard gray pieces right here. The way they did it for the original Lloyd's Legendary Dragon earlier this year was that they used these prefab pieces, but they actually built an entire system head to fit seamlessly around the new molded parts, which I think is probably the best way they could have possibly done it. Unfortunately, it definitely was probably a parts budget thing to just have them be mounted on the standard configuration here, which doesn't look too bad. I just think it could have looked a little bit better. Now, what I like about this is that each of the heads actually does have the specific element of the ninja featured on top of them on these spikes. You have the trans blue for Zayn, the trans orange for Kai, the black for Cole, and the transparent yellow for Jay. So all of them have their own very unique, distinct look and feel to them, which really makes this set truly feel like it's coming alive in your hands. All in all, there's not really too much negative things I can even say about it. It is a very nice and bulky dragon. I love the usage of these very large gold pieces for the first time for the large body of the dragon here. The scale technique to actually have these scales be layered on the front is really expertly done. All of these scales are actually on hinges here at slightly different angles to make it truly feel like the layered scales of a dragon. And all in all, this is definitely one of the best dragons they have ever done for Ninjago. The only thing that would have improved it, in my opinion, are maybe being able to move the wings or potentially fabric wings, which always look a little bit more impressive, and of course, slightly better heads, but really can't ask for too much more. But with that, we have summed up our look at the final LEGO Ninjago set. For $140, this is pretty overpriced, and they are actually upping it to, I believe, $150 or $60 later on this year when September hits, which is very bad. I think that is absolutely way too overpriced for a model like this. $120 is pushing it. $100 would have been very nice, but probably unrealistic. $140 is kind of crazy for a model like this. Don't really know how it is possible for people to be able to easily afford this, being one of the most focused sets of the wave, and I really do wish that this was priced a little bit more fairly. But again, that's what waiting for discounts are for. But with that, we have summed up our look at the final Ninjago set, so let's take a step back and take a look at the entire wave as a whole. Alright, with that we have summed up my thoughts on the individual LEGO Ninjago Crystalized sets. As you can probably tell, it is a pretty mixed wave overall. There are some high highs, but also some low lows, and that's why I really wanted to put an emphasis on how the different vehicles work together and how each one works as its own standalone set. Now that being said, I really do appreciate how much thought went into the composition of the wave. If you notice, there are specifically 6 sets for each of these 6 core ninja. You have Kai, Jay, Zayn, Cole, Lloyd, and Nia. They each are represented by their own vehicle, whether large or small. And I also appreciate how Nia, who typically gets some of the smallest sets, if anything at all, now gets one of the largest of the wave next to Lloyd's Dragon. Now, of course, some of the vehicles did tend to suffer a little bit by this. Cole's vehicle in particular does feel like a bit of a downgrade compared to his 2016 Rock Raider, which was a very similar vehicle. That one did, however, feature suspension and a gear feature, whereas this one, the function does not work too well, and there's not really too much you can actually do with it. Kai's vehicle has a really cool silhouette, and I really like the way it looks overall. That being said, the wheel splaying feature is very strange because, as I saw in the close-ups, it really doesn't work all too well in terms of driving. If you want to drive it, they have to be just straight and narrow forwards. Not really sure what was going on with that feature, but that's a big con for the set itself. Otherwise, though, it looks really cool. Zane's Jet does feel like a bit more of the same from what we've come to expect from Ninjago, very similar to the Kai Fighter and Jay's Storm Raider, but it is still very nice and carves out its own niche. And Jay's bike is honestly one of the stronger entries in the wave, despite being one of the classic Ninjago oversized motorcycles. It actually does integrate a few unique building techniques. I love the usage of the dragon head on Jay's bike in particular, and I think the wheel choice works out really well in general. In terms of the two largest ninja size sets, Lloyd's Dragon is definitely one of the best dragons they've done, but I still think it could have been a little bit better because the wings, of course, do not actually flap. They are fully fixed, so you cannot actually pose the wings in a flying motion, which is a little disappointing to me. The function is really cool, but I do feel like they could have integrated both the function as well as some sort of either a flapping function or just ball joints with friction joints to allow you to pose the wings with the function itself. That would have pretty much made this perfect, and thankfully it's not too hard to customize it if you want to do something like that. Simply replace the Technic beam with a ball and socket joint with friction, and I think that would do the trick. Now, in terms of the Samurai X Mech, it definitely is one of the better Ninjago mechs we've gotten in recent history, especially because it does include knees, which is fantastic. That being said, I do feel like a similar scale of mech was pulled off a lot better at the Zane's Titan mech, which actually came out just last year in 2021. That was literally half the price of this, but was around the same scale and also had knees. So I do think they definitely could have pulled this off at a slightly cheaper price point, especially because $140 for this does not feel worth it to me. Now, that being said, it is still great to, again, get a vehicle or some sort of animal or set that represents each of the main ninja. It looks really cool to have all the vehicles together as part of the team, and I appreciate how they did that for the Crystalized Wave, which is kind of the end of this era of Ninjago. Now, moving onwards to the villain faction, we actually get two different villain sets, which is pretty nice because typically in recent Ninjago years, we do not really get any villain-focused sets whatsoever. We're lucky to get maybe a structure or something like that, but it's pretty rare we actually get two different sets. Now, unfortunately, the quality of these sets is pretty hit or miss. The concept for the floating temple for the Crystal King is a really fun and cool one. I love that they did try to work in some sort of tensegrity structure with the chains on the prison on the side there. Now, that being said, it does appear that a lot of the structure of this temple was stripped away due to budgetary reasons during the set's prototyping process. In fact, if you look at the prototype images, which were accidentally listed on certain set websites, you may notice that the original temple was a lot larger and more bulky. It was not just hovering above the ground, but it was a full-on structure that was an inverted rock. All of that has pretty much been stripped away in favor of just this smaller base here and a disconnected front section, which is a little bit disappointing to me because the early images were very promising for this temple, but it does appear that it was cut down due to budget. Now, that being said, there are still a lot of really fun things to do with the temple. I like how they actually have a display point for each of the golden weapons, and it does feel like this has a progression to it where you can actually have the ninja be leaping from platform to platform, but it is lacking in a lot of other regards. Now, onto the other set, the Crystal King itself is another really fun concept for a Ninjago villain. I love the centaur design with the 4 legs plus the wings and the very nice sculpting for the headpiece. Although again, unfortunately, this does seem to be a victim of a lot of cost cutting from prototype to final set. Initial images showed a much larger and more complex weapon with the staff. The headpiece was built up to be a lot more detailed and brick built, even though the headpiece is really nice on this one. And again, a lot of this does appear to have been stripped away. Unfortunately, this also is really restricted in terms of articulation. As I showed in the review, you cannot even move the front legs whatsoever. I do think you could very easily have mounted them on the ball joints that the mech uses and the dragon uses, and obviously, as you can see, these are standing up just fine, but for whatever reason, they decided to make the legs fully fixed despite actually inventing the new ball joint to allow for larger pieces to be able to be moved safely, which is a bit of a disappointment to me. Maybe that's because the legs are canted forwards, which is why they didn't really trust it if kids were playing rough with it and slamming it on the ground, but honestly, I really do feel like that newer style of joint would have held up just to make the front legs move, because as it is right now, it basically is just a statue. Sure, you can move the back legs, but the front ones being just static and fixed kind of remind me of the Mino creature from Season 13, which was one of the weakest sets we got from that wave. This honestly just feels like another version of it with the fixed legs, which is pretty disappointing, and it doesn't even have a play feature. At least with that one, it had an excuse because you had to press on the top front of it to activate the function. This doesn't really have a function, so I don't really know why they decided not to give it articulation, which is a bit disappointing to me. Overall, I think the concept is very cool. I would love to see revamps of this particular set because a centaur with wings is a really fun concept for the Overlord villain. The execution just leaves a little bit to be desired for this set in particular. Which is why I feel like this wave is one of the most mixed waves we've gotten out of Ninjago in quite a while. The figures, as I talked about in part 1 of the review, are stunning. They are probably the best Ninjago figures we've ever gotten for any wave, and probably will ever get. There again are 30 unique and exclusive figures to this wave. Each and every single set has an exclusive figure, which is amazing to see, and they also paid a lot of attention to the figure distribution. As we talked about in part 1, you get 2 copies of all the golden suits for the ninja, 1 copy of the normal suits, and 1 copy of the winged suits. So if you want to, you can actually put the second copies, if you buy them all, the second copies of the gold suits can be driving the vehicles, the winged ones, normal ones, and second copies of the gold ones can be displayed on their own, and everything works out really well. I also really like the efforts to, again, make a figure exclusive to each set. Jay's motorcycle could have easily just included the golden version of Jay plus one of the minions, but instead they specifically put the dragon version just to make it exclusive to that set, which also is a great way to get one of the coolest figures of the wave for only $20 in that set. So overall, the figures are stunning. These sets are hit or miss. The dragon is probably the best set of the wave, but I do still feel like there could have been a lot of improvements made to it, followed closely by the samurai mech, and then going into some of the other vehicles. Zane's Jet is pretty much what we've come to expect from Ninjago, but is still a solid build. The J-Bike is again one of those examples of something we've seen before in Ninjago, but is a great build. Kai's Dragon Raider tries to go a little bit outside of the standard vehicle mold and succeeds to some extent and fails significantly to others, and Cole's vehicle is simply just not too interesting, especially compared to other Cole vehicles we've gotten in the past. And again, the villain side, it is a really cool color scheme to have the gold with the transparent pink, really focusing on the purples of the Overlord as well, but I do think that these specific sets for the villains do fall a little bit short in my eyes. Which is why I would rank Crystalized the entire wave, including both the figures and the sets, at around a 6.5 to 7 out of 10, at least compared to recent Ninjago waves, especially looking back at, say, Seabound or Master of the Mountain in particular, which had some of the best sets we've gotten for a Ninjago summer wave. The ones here are fairly average. There's a lot of good, there's some bad, and there's just a lot of average standard Ninjago stuff, which does make sense because this is the end of the TV show in its current format as we know it. As you know, Ninjago will be rebooted next year. We don't really know what that exactly entails, whether it's new characters or a new style of storytelling. All of that is going to change up next year, so very exciting to see that, but this is a fitting conclusion to the era of Ninjago we have known to love. And so, with that, we have summed up this review of Ninjago Crystalized Season 15 Wave. Let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of this set wave? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? And what are your favorite and least favorite sets of the wave? Also, let me know if you own any of them already and what your experience with these sets has been. With that, thank you all so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming away very soon. I will also be taking a look at the LEGO Monkey Kid set, so do stay tuned for future videos for that. And so, I'll see you then. Bye-bye for now.